Welcome in, everybody. It's the weekly installment of the MisFit's Overtime podcast. I want to welcome you in here today. It is Sunday, July 1st. Believe it or not, July 1st. This year is just going by us very quickly. Kind of want to recap where we were last week, what we've been talking about, and just share a little bit of feedback from what we've talked about this week as we get into the podcast, and then really get into the meat and potatoes of what our lesson should have been today. But before I do that, I just want to thank everybody that's been listening and paying attention weekly to the podcast. Your support is very important to me. I really appreciate any and all the feedback that I'm receiving from you guys. It's important to me so that I can further this ministry, further this message. So anything that you guys can share with me, good, bad, positive, negative, definitely is going to help better this program, if you will. So thank you to those that are faithful in listening. I would ask that you would continue to share the link on your Facebook page. Maybe you're on Twitter. If you could go ahead and link it up there. If you're YouTube, if you've got a YouTube channel or a YouTube account, would definitely love for you to subscribe and also share that with your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers. Just share with everybody. So last week, just to kind of jump into this thing, just to remind you, this summer we're talking about that idea of service, how as Christians we are to be servants, and how the Bible calls us, directs us, commands us to do that. And so to recap, we finished up last week the acronym SHAPE with in regard to how we should serve. We talked about our ability and how we apply those. We talked about our personality, and we talked about our experiences. And I really hammered home last week about using our experiences to serve people, to share what we have been through, to share what we've been a part of or what we've come through, maybe in the midst of what you're experiencing, to help guide and direct and minister to other people. Talked a lot about understanding our enemy. I talked a lot about how we need to wake up and really pray for that armor of God to be put on us as we start our day, because as someone in life group this morning had said, you really don't know what you're walking into when you go into work or to school or even just into the other room at your home. We think we're prepared. We think we know what we're going to experience. We think we know exactly what's going to happen today. But the reality is we don't. And so as someone shared this morning, they got up every day this week, and they prayed that God would prepare them for the day, would put on that protection and pray for that armor of God. And so that was really encouraging to me. So if nothing else, if one person listened and reacted to something that I said on this podcast last week, I know that God is using it as a vehicle. And so thank you for that feedback, because that encourages me to continue to do this. There are times that I doubt. There are times that I don't know if people are listening, and I don't know if people are getting the message that God would want me to put out there. And I really felt like this was a good vehicle to do that. And so it's good to hear that you are listening and that God is speaking through this podcast. And so please continue to do that. So really just to kind of recap today's meeting, today's Misfits Life Group Hour. We had a lesson prepared. Well, I did anyway. And we're going to get into that here in just a few minutes. But I really want to talk about just the incredible atmosphere that we have in our group. And I really want to encourage you that if you're listening to this and you're not a part of a life group, come be a part of ours. I want you to be a part of any life group we have here at Central Baptist Church. And you may say, well, look, I don't live close, or Central's just not the right place for me. Okay, that's fine. Be a part of a life group somewhere. They may call them something different. They may call them small groups at other places or other churches. They may call them Sunday school classes. We've adopted that term life group, as I've explained before, because it's a group of people that share life. But be a part of one. Partake. Get involved. And it's not just about serving. A life group is not just about serving. It's about allowing yourself to be served by other people. That when you feel empty, when you feel run down, when you feel drug out, there's a group of people that are there to help lift you up. When you're struggling in your spiritual walk, these are people that you can reach out to and say, hey, can you help point me back to the one who has all the answers? And so today, somebody came in with a question from somebody at work. It wasn't even something that they were dealing with directly. And it was a question about marriage. Some folks at their place of employment had gotten together for discussion and said, hey, we've noticed or we know that you've been married for a great number of years. How do you make it work? And so this person just started to explain the ins and outs of their marriage and the things that work, the things that don't work, the good things, the not so good things. And it just got real and got honest and said, I don't have all the answers, but here's what works for us, for me and my spouse. And so they brought that question to the group and said, what are some other things that I can share with my coworkers? And we spent about 45 minutes just breaking down things that the Bible talks about, attributes and characters of people and how we should act in a marriage and how we should really act in relationships, not just marriages, but in friendships and as Christians. And it was a great discussion. It was a great time. And I kind of love when that happens because it gives us an opportunity to be fed in the way we need to be fed that day. Because as a life group instructor or teacher or leader, I can trust that the Lord is putting a message on my heart to share with the group that day. But I also think it's important to be reactive to what the group needs, what they're going through. And so I love that our life group members are bold enough to just say, hey, I know this may derail what you got going on, teacher, but I really need to talk about this. I love that. We've had that happen probably twice in the last 6 weeks. And I think it's brought us closer together as people. It's helped us to learn a little bit about each other. And I've really seen some people come out of their shell a little bit and just start to talk and start to share life and talk about things that I had no idea about them. And so I love that. So again, if you're not a part of a life group, come be a part of ours. If you're not local to the area or this church just isn't where God's calling you to be, go find a small group or a life group or a Sunday school class somewhere. Be a part of a group of people. It's healthy. It really is. And, God, when he created man, he didn't leave Adam alone. He created Eve to be a helpmate. And we all need helpmates. We all need people around us that are going to support us and lift us up and care for us. And so I cannot stress enough how important a life group is. We are to be the helpmates on this journey we call life. So today, the lesson we were going to get into, but we didn't have time for, and I love this MisFit's Overtime podcast because now I get to do the lesson, and it doesn't put us back a week. I can still further on next week with what we were going to discuss and not be held back a week because now we've got the vehicle to do it. Just hopefully you guys will listen to this throughout the week, preferably before next Sunday, so that way you're up to date on the material. So again, we are in the midst of a summer-long study, if you will, about being servants to the Lord, being in the service of the Lord, and also being a servant to people. And so today what we're going to talk about is really how a servant acts. How does a servant act? A lot of times we have this idea of Christians should act a certain way. They should look a certain way. They should carry themselves a certain way. And they should act a certain way. Well, I would tell you to check that against what the Bible says and try and keep your own opinion out of it. I think a lot of times the world says that Christians can't be angry and Christians can't be upset or Christians can't be rude. The reality is, yes, we can. Should we? Now that's the question we should be asking, is should we be angry? Should we be rude? Should we be less compassionate than another Christian? We all have the capability to have all those negative qualities. So today we're going to talk about how a servant should act. Okay? And we really are going to break this down just a couple ways, and we're going to work very quickly through this. First, I would tell you the very simplest way that a servant should act is to be like Jesus. We all remember, I don't know, probably mid-90s when the WWJD bracelets were a big hit. And if you don't know what that is, it was a little bracelet that was a cloth bracelet, I believe, that just said the letters W.W.J.D. And it stood for what would Jesus do? And it really is a very cliche thing to say nowadays, but I can remember when that came out. Every Christian teenager, every youth group member couldn't get to the bookstore quick enough to buy one, and they were selling them off the shelves. And yeah, it was a cool thing. It was a trendy thing, but the message, I think, was really lost through the trend. You know, now it's more of a joke, I think, when somebody says WWJD versus what it was really intended for. I think the creator of that trend or the creator of that bracelet probably had such great intentions for what its purpose was, but unfortunately it's gotten lost in the trend. But when we talk about how a servant should act, I'm reminded of that bracelet. And so in every situation we have to say, WWJD. What would Jesus do? Well, I would tell you one of the first things that he would do is Jesus would put others first. You see, the world tells us that it should be me first. The world tells us that you should go out and get yours. The world says, make sure that before anybody else is taken care of, you take care of you. Because if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of other people. I tell you that that's not true. Jesus gave up everything. And not just Jesus, but the disciples gave up everything. When Jesus called the first two disciples, he didn't ask them to put their 2-week notice in at their job and save a little bit of money and come and follow him. He said, stop what you're doing. Drop what you're doing. Come and follow me. They were two fishermen. And in my mind's eye, I just see that they just dropped their nets because they recognized who Jesus was, and they said, we're gone. We're with you. And so how a servant should act, first and foremost, in being like Christ, is it should be a you first attitude or a them first attitude, not a me first attitude. It's not about me. It's about them. It's about you. And if it's a service that you're giving directly to the Lord, it's about him. It's about his glory, not mine. You know, most people associate greatness with being a leader. You know, you're not great unless you're out in front. Churches are no different. You go to a place of employment, the most important person is the boss or the CEO or the president. Churches are no different. Oftentimes, church members and congregations look at the pastor and say, that's the top dog. That's the greatest person in the church because they are the leader. They are at the head of the table. The reality is in God's eyes, it's not true. In God's eyes, that person has just as much value to this church as the piano player, or as the deacon, or as the Sunday school teacher, or the nursery aide, or the ladies that cook on Wednesday nights, or the men that take the trash out, or those that clean the toilets. They all play a role in service to the Lord here at the church. And so most people associate greatness with being a leader. Christ was the opposite. Christ very, very easily could have been, I am the leader of this movement. I am the patriarch of this movement. I am at the head of this Christianity thing. And that makes me great. But the reality is, if you read Scripture and you read the account of Jesus' life, he always called himself a servant. He never called himself a leader. He is a servant. Servant to the Father in heaven, and servant to the people here on this earth. And so when you say, yeah, okay, it's easy to say be like Jesus, act like Jesus, that'll make me a good servant to the Lord. But how do I do it? It's not me first. It's them or you or him first. And secondly is, you are a servant, not a leader. You can lead by serving. I had a manager one time, actually a VP of our company that I worked for. And I took a position out of state, going to run a branch. And I'd never managed adult people before. Kind of sounds funny, adult people. What I mean is, I was a supervisor at our home office, and everybody that I supervised was my age or younger. And at the time, I was 20, 21 at most. So I only managed people that were in my age range or younger. And if you've ever been in management or supervisor position, that's fairly easy to do because people your age think like you and they act like you. Typically, they have the same life responsibilities you do at that age, 20, 21. But I remember going out of state, and it was my first day, and the VP met me there at the branch, and he explained to me very simply that this is a different world. You're now managing adults, people that are twice your age, some that are almost 3 times your age. We had some guys working there that were almost 60, 62 years old, right at retirement age. He said, you're going to be managing people that have kids your age. It's going to be very different for them. It was going to be very different for me. But I'll never forget, he asked me, he said, how did Jesus gain the respect and the following that he did? I couldn't answer him. I'm 20 years old and grew up in church, and I couldn't answer that question. No doubt intimidated. Not so much by him, but the situation. And the question threw me for a loop. For one, we never really discussed religion in the workplace. So anyway, the VP asked me again, he said, how is it that Jesus got so many people to follow him? And I said, man, I don't know. And he wrote down on a piece of paper, I'll never forget, we're sitting in the office by the printer, and he wrote down the word serve. He said, because he served them. And he looked at me and he said, when you serve these people, they will follow you. And to this day, I don't forget that. And I apply that to my journey here and my ministry here at Central Baptist. It's because very easily we can associate our greatness with being a leader. We can let that thing go to our head and say, well, I'm the life group teacher, so people are going to do what I say. Or I'm the pastor, and this is the way I want things done, so people are going to fall in line or they won't be here. Or I'm the Sunday school director, and if the teachers don't do exactly what I want or teach the curriculum I want, then they'll go away. That church won't grow. That congregation won't grow. Some really cool Southerners would say that dog don't hunt. It doesn't work. But when the pastor or the deacon or the Sunday school teacher or the Sunday school director or the music minister, when they say, I'm going to serve these people, I have no doubt those people will follow their direction. Now, keep in mind, their direction needs to be kept in check. Their direction needs to be pointing back to the Lord, not the agenda of the Sunday school teacher, not the agenda of the life group teacher, or the Sunday school director, or the music minister, or the pastor. The direction of the Lord. And those people in those positions need to be pointing them back to the Lord. So be like Jesus. I would tell you another reflection or another way that servants should act is really how God's testing your heart. How are you committed? So how you should act is committed to the ministry. You know, God makes us all different in so many different ways. But He gives us all the same heart to serve. The way we serve is different. The way I serve is not going to be the way you serve. Sometimes it might overlap. But not everybody's going to do a podcast. Not everybody's going to teach a life group class. Not everybody's going to be a pastor or a music minister or a deacon. You know, God asks us all to serve in so many different areas. But sometimes I think He asks us to step out of our comfort zone and to commit to serving in areas that we may not be specialized in, we may not be strong in, because it shows Him that we're acting on our commitment to Him. So what I mean by that is God may be pulling you to help out in the children's ministry. And you may say, or you may hear a need. You may hear a need in the church that there's need in the children's ministry. I'll tell you what, there's always a need in the children's ministry. And so you may hear that. And you may hear God saying that you need to get more involved in this church, but you haven't pinpointed where. God may be asking you to go serve in that ministry, in that area of this church, even though you're not strong in it. You may have zero history in working in the kids' ministry. But there's a need that needs to be filled, that God's telling you to get involved. And He's asking you to step out of your comfort zone, to be a part of that. Because He wants to see how committed you are to real life change for people. How committed are you to serving people the way I need? God has an agenda, and it will be fulfilled. We call it God's will. But if He doesn't have people willing to step up and serve, it's going to be very, very difficult for that will to be achieved. And there are people that are going to miss out on the blessing of heaven because of it. So there's going to be a time that God may be asking you to be uncomfortable and to step out into an area that you're not strong in. It may be your weakest area. You may be somebody that doesn't do well speaking in front of a crowd, and God says, I need you to fill in and be a teacher this week because so-and-so got sick. Or I really want you to share this message, and you just need to get over this for this very moment, this fear of speaking in front of people. So I would tell you that another way a servant acts is uncomfortable at times. And God's asking us to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I hope that makes sense. God's asking us to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because a servant's heart really reveals their spiritual maturity. And so if your servant's heart, if your heart, your desires, again, we talk about that heart is not a physical muscle. We don't talk about a physical organ. We're talking about, when we talk about heart, we're talking about desires. So if your servant's heart says, I'm going to be where you need me to, God, even if it's uncomfortable, God, even if I'm weak in this area, even if I have no idea what I'm doing, that reveals your spiritual maturity. I would tell you that if God impresses upon you or presents you an opportunity to serve in an area and you're not strong in it and you're not sure about what you're doing and you think it's the weakest thing that He could ask you to do, and your reaction is, I can't do that because I'm no good at it, and you give no thought to it, no consideration at all, That's a spiritually immature heart. That's a heart that's struggling with their spiritual maturity. Because our servant's heart reveals our character. It reveals our spiritual maturity and it reveals our character and who we are. Because a lot of us can come in here on Sunday and come in here on Wednesday and Sunday night and even get on a podcast or get on Facebook and we can act the part real well. We can talk about how we give and how we do things and how it's important to help people. But if we're not willing to step up and do the work when the work is presented, it shows our spiritual maturity and it shows our character. And it'll show our flaws in our character. And you know what? Those that serve and those that do, even if they have no idea what they're doing, just trusting that God will give them the words and the direction, it shows the greatness in their character. But I would tell you that we oftentimes get mixed up in that. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done it before. I have no clue. I would be no good, so I'm not even going to try. And we also get caught up in it's not a big job. It's not really serving because it's not one of the big flashy positions at the church. It's not one of those positions we put on a pedestal like a life group teacher or a pastor or a deacon or a music minister. Listen, serving is serving, whether it's wiping a table or teaching a class. It does not matter. And I would tell you one thing, that everybody listening to this, everybody in the sound of my voice, can serve in some way in their local church. You're saying, no, I can't. I'm not skilled. There's no special skill needed to throw out trash or to wipe down tables. Now, people might have preferences. A preference of how we wipe down a table and a preference on how we take the trash out. But there's no special skill needed. There are jobs right here in this local church, right here at Central Baptist Church, that everyone listening to me could do. No skill required. No special skill required. No training required. You just got to be willing to do the work. And another way that a servant acts is they make themselves available. That's huge. Because in this world, in America today, we are just so overscheduled as people. There's some of you that are listening to this right now that are going, this thing's like 30 minutes long. I ain't even got 30 minutes to listen to this guy. That's okay. Listen to 5 minutes. But we as a society, we have just overscheduled ourselves to the point where there is no time left for other people. If there's no time left for yourself, there's no time left for other people. Think about that. God's very clear in the Bible that rest is important. If it wasn't, He would have taken the seventh day off, right? Think about it. God didn't need to rest. He wasn't tired. He was showing us that it's okay to take a break. But if you have scheduled yourself so thin that you don't even have time to take a break for you, how do you think you're going to be available to serve when He needs you to serve? We've got to start looking at our schedules and really taking out time and saying, I have to set time apart to serve the Lord. Now, I'm not always going to tell you that God's going to say, hey, every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, I need you to serve. What I mean by that is we need to be so flexible in our schedules that at the drop of a hat, if God calls us to do something, we're able to do it. And you might be listening to this and saying, there's no way. I have to work and I have a family and I have all these things that you don't even understand, Kevin. You don't have them. Kevin, you don't have a family that you have to worry about, and you don't have a set job because you've got your own little business going and you can make up your own hours whenever you want. Some of that's true. I would tell you though that I would argue that I work a lot more hours than most people with a regular job because the stress is so great. So this is an area this week that really spoke to me because I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with scheduling enough time in my life so that I'm able to serve when I'm called to serve. People have been asking me why my attendance has been lacking on Wednesday nights, and I've been taking that time to myself. And even then, I go home and I still work and do things. And I don't mean like work at the house. I mean, I continue to work in my business and run reports and do things on the computer that just stress me out and consume my time. And so I'm not even taking that time away from God and giving it back to myself. I have overscheduled myself and I've limited my ability to serve. And I don't want to see anyone else do that. That's something that I need to change in my life. I need to stop overscheduling my life because it is affecting my ability to serve. So I have to ask myself, and I got to ask you, are you available to God at any time on any given day to serve? We have to honestly answer that question. Because if we go to God and say, God, I want to serve you. I want to be a great servant of the Lord. Jesus, I want to serve you. Just not Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. You can't do that. That's not what the Christian life's about. Christian life isn't, hey, God, I'm good to serve on Tuesdays from 7 to 8. Outside of that, find somebody else. Could you imagine? If that's the way that we as Christians act, it's no surprise to me that the world is going to hell every day. It's no surprise. Because we've overscheduled ourselves with things of the world, which has limited our ability to serve the things of the Father. Servants that overschedule themselves and maybe even Christians that overwhelm themselves with things, they see interruptions of their day as negative things. When really a solid servant of the Lord should see those interruptions as an opportunity to practice their faith and practice serving. It should not stress me out when somebody calls me at 2 p.m. and says, I need your help. It should not stress you out when you get a text message at work or right when you get home to sit down for dinner and somebody in the church goes, I need your help. I need an ear to listen. I need advice. It's 11 o'clock at night and I'm going through a crisis. That should not be viewed as an interruption. It is not an interruption. It is an opportunity. And we don't see those opportunities unless we pay attention. Servants should be paying attention and be alert. That's another way they should act. They should act with alertness. They should always be on the lookout for ways to help other people. They should always be focused on what's going on around them. Because just like overscheduling ourselves, we can become overconsumed with ourselves. So we must always be on the lookout for what's going on around us. And this life group class, this is awesome because I get to hear every week about what people are going through. I'm on the lookout for things because I know what's happening in their life. They share things about what's going on at work, at home, at church, in their relationships, in their friendships, with their families. And so when there's subtle changes in their life, and maybe it's just in their attitude or their mood or how they answer questions or how involved they are in what's going on. When you see these subtle changes, it's because we're paying attention. Because we're trying to serve one another and we're on the lookout. The truth is we may only get one opportunity to serve somebody. But if we're not looking and paying attention to the needs, we may miss it. You may have a family member or a coworker or a friend that you've been looking for an opportunity to share the gospel with, looking for a chance to share the plan of salvation. And I know a lot of times those opportunities come in the midst of just immense pain or tragedy in someone's life. But sometimes they happen, those opportunities happen daily, but we miss them. just in the sense that somebody may say, I'm having a bad day. Why? I don't know. I don't feel fulfilled. My life just doesn't seem fulfilling. I'm not sure why I'm upset. I don't know why I'm angry. I don't know what's going on. It's just a bad day. I feel like I have no hope. These are all opportunities to share your faith. But if you're not on the lookout, if you're not paying attention to what's going on around you, you're going to miss it. And I'll be honest with you, that may be the only chance that you have to share with that person. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. I could end this podcast right now and have a car accident on my way home. You guys will never see or hear from me again. So we have to make the most of every opportunity, because we may only get one chance. We may only have one interaction with that person. We are not promised tomorrow. We're not promised the next 5 minutes. We're not promised the next breath. If you accept Jesus Christ, you're promised eternity, though. I'll tell you that. But we as servants, we have got to be paying attention. As a football coach once told me, you're playing defense, you got to keep your head on a swivel. And that means going side to side. You got to watch what's going on. You got to see what's happening. What's the offense doing? This servant's life is no different. You got to keep your head on a swivel. What's going on the left? What's going on the right? What's going on up the middle? We have to see what people are experiencing and what they're going through so that we can help them meet those needs, not just physically, but spiritually. Be on the lookout for those spiritual needs that people were talking about. And the last thing I want to talk about that servants, how they act, is they do the best with what they have. They don't make excuses or wait until circumstances are better. They just serve. They don't say, well, a good servant doesn't say, well, yeah, I'd like to be involved in that, or I'd like to teach that class, or I'd like to be involved on that Wednesday night program, or be involved in VBS, but the time's just not right. I got to get some things together in my life. I got to make some things move around. And a good servant doesn't make excuses. They serve. They don't wait until circumstances are better. Because let me tell you something. In the world that we live in today, one circumstance will be replaced by another circumstance. What I mean by that is there's always going to be something that you can say keeps you from service to the Lord. There is always something that's going to take up your time. There's always something that's going to discourage you. There's always something that's going to be the excuse as to why you don't serve people, as to why you don't serve the Lord. A good servant just does what needs to be done when it needs to be done. Don't wait. Nike says it best, just do it. You do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. There are going to be times in this life where in your serving of people, you just got to get it done. You got to wait for a council to come in behind you and make a plan of action and get 15 people together. You just need to take care of the problem. Meet the physical need. Meet the spiritual need. Just get it done. We will always make mistakes. Always. Maybe not every time you serve. I'm not saying that every time you go out to serve, you're going to make a mistake. What I am saying is that you're not perfect, and neither am I. I am going to make mistakes. I have probably made mistakes today. I will probably make mistakes tomorrow. Don't use that as an excuse not to serve. I can't use my mistakes as an excuse not to serve, and neither should you. A good servant doesn't use past mistakes or doesn't use the fear of future mistakes to keep them from serving. That's not the way God wants it. There's a song or verse maybe that, I think it's a song that says, God can make beauty out of ashes. There's nothing that you and I can do that God can't undo. for His glory. We could set some things back and we can make some mistakes and we can leave some bad experiences with people, but God can undo anything that you or I do. So don't let your past mistakes, don't let your current mistakes or your fear of future mistakes keep you from serving. So the takeaway today is, I'll leave you with a couple questions. Just very honestly, are you making yourself available for service? Or do you need to take something out of your current schedule to make time to serve? Are you making yourself available for service? If the answer is yes, I would ask you to consider, is it as much time as God would want you to? Because sometimes I get caught up in that, like, I gave the minimum. I gave 2 or 3 hours this week to the church, so I'm good for a week. The reality is God may be asking more of me. He may be asking more of you. And maybe you're not making your time available for service. So really stop and think about this week. What do I need to get cut out of my schedule? That needs to be a prayer to God. God, what do you want me to get rid of in my life? Let me tell you something. God may not be asking you to give something up. He may be asking you to tweak it. Maybe you really enjoy going to the movies, or you really enjoy doing car shows like I do, or you just have some sort of relaxing thing. Maybe it's baseball games or whatever. I don't know, fill in the blank, whatever your relaxation thing is. Maybe it's going to the pool or the beach. Maybe your prayer needs to be, God, how do I insert you into that? Maybe you take your Bible to the pool with you and read it and discuss it with people as you're soaking up the rays. Maybe, like I've talked about before, God's kind of impressing on me when I do these car shows. Maybe I start a Bible study at our area. Maybe you're a witness to people at baseball games just by the way you act and the things you don't do, the drinks you don't have, the language you don't use. I don't know. So maybe it's not so much about cutting things out of your schedule as it is interjecting Jesus into those things that are in your schedule in a way to serve people. The second thing I would ask you in closing is, are you on the lookout daily for ways to serve those around you at home, at work, at school, at the grocery store, wherever you are? Are you looking for ways and opportunities to serve people, not only their physical needs, but their spiritual ones? We talk about it here at church, and I'm a firm believer in a lot of times we meet the physical needs, but we don't do so good on the spiritual needs. And we really need to focus on those physical needs, because I believe once we meet the physical needs, that gives us, and it builds a relationship and it builds trust, and it gives us an opportunity to meet those spiritual needs. So don't discount meeting those physical needs. But are you on the lookout daily to meet those needs in people? We're going to continue next week with part 2 of this discussion. There's a whole lot more characteristics of servants. There's a whole lot more actions and ways of living that servants should be a part of. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I'm trying to keep them between 25 and 30 minutes each. I know that I could go on, and this one's been about 44 minutes now that I see, so we will wrap this thing up. As always, I really do appreciate everybody that's listening. I appreciate any feedback that you give me. I would love to start seeing some discussion on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you listen to this podcast this week, please share it on Facebook. Please comment on it. I'd love to get a discussion started. I'd love to see your friends listen to it and then discuss with you about it. Maybe they agree, maybe they disagree, maybe they're confused, they want to know more. Let us just use this vehicle as an opportunity to have a discussion about Jesus Christ. As always, anybody that wants to come on here and have a discussion, you're more than welcome. I'm ready for somebody to say, hey, Kev, I want to be on there. We'll get together, we'll make it happen. I hope everybody has a good week. I hope they enjoy their 4th of July. Everybody stays safe. And we'll talk to you next week. I appreciate everybody that takes the time out to listen to this and all the feedback that you guys give. I really am excited about where this is going to go in 2018 and beyond. So for the Misfits Overtime, this is Kevin, and I appreciate all of you. Have a good week.